Welcome to this explainer on the historic and honestly incredibly fragile June 2026 peace agreement between the United States and Iran. It's known as the Islamabad Memorandum, and this deeply complex deal was forged to stop a devastating 15-week war that was literally rocking global trade and fundamentally altering West Asia. Today, we're unpacking exactly what's actually in this text, the completely chaotic path it took to get here, and the massive hurdles that still stand in the way of lasting peace.
Let's dive right into June 14th. The world's attention was grabbed by this one dramatic announcement from U.S. President Donald Trump. Let the oil flow. I mean, talk about a headline grabber, right? That statement signaled the immediate end to the United States naval blockade on Iranian ports and the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. After months of military strikes, this was the diplomatic off-ramp the global economy had been desperately waiting for.
Section 1. A breakthrough in West Asia, or the climax first.
Now, to really get why this matters to you and me, look at this number, 20%. That is a massive chunk. It represents the staggering percentage of the entire world's oil and liquefied natural gas that normally squeezes through the Strait of Hormuz. During the conflict, this vital artery was effectively severed. Energy costs absolutely skyrocketed, creating a massive shipping crisis. It's exactly why UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called the deal a critical step. The world simply couldn't afford for this strait to stay closed.
The diplomatic machinery moved incredibly fast. On June 14th, following a ton of intensive mediation by Pakistan, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and Turkey, the text was agreed upon and digitally signed. This officially ended the blockade and set up a temporary framework, which paved the way for a formal, in-person signing ceremony slated for June 19th over in Geneva, Switzerland.
Moving to Section 2, the rocky road to peace, flashback to the conflict.
Because, to truly appreciate how miraculous this deal is, we need to zoom out and look at the absolute chaotic timeline it took to get here. War breaks out in late February with major strikes. By early April, they managed to broker a fragile 2-week ceasefire, which leads to these high-stakes direct talks in Islamabad between U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance and Iranian Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bahir Ghalibafeh. But get this, those talks completely collapse after just 21 hours. Literally, the very next day, April 13th, the U.S. slams a strict naval blockade on Iran. It took 2 more grueling months of intermittent strikes and back-channel diplomacy to finally reach that June 14th breakthrough.
Section 3. The 60-day taking clock, which is the window for technical negotiations.
So here's the kicker. The crucial thing to remember is that this is not some permanent, all-encompassing peace treaty yet. It's a bridge, a very fragile bridge with a specific 60-day timer literally ticking down. During this window, 3 massive steps have to be navigated. Step 1 happened immediately. Lift the blockade, reopen Hormuz. Step 2 involves providing temporary economic relief to Iran by unfreezing between $12 and $25 billion in overseas assets. But Step 3? Wow. Step 3 is the real hurdle. Over the next 60 days, technical teams have to sit down and negotiate the ultimate fate of Iran's nuclear program.
And right at the center of those technical talks is a core looming danger. According to the International Atomic Energy Agency, Iran possesses over 440 kilograms of highly enriched uranium. We're talking enriched to 60% purity here. Folks, that is just one tiny short technical step away from the 90% threshold needed for a weapon. Negotiators have exactly 60 days to decide the fate of these deeply buried stockpiles. Are they going to be diluted, removed, or heavily monitored?
Well, to help answer that, there is a massive financial incentive on the table. To ensure compliance, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance noted that Iran could eventually have access to a staggering $300 billion reconstruction fund. Think about that number for a second. It highlights just how much both sides have to gain, or lose, if these 60-day technical talks succeed or fail.
On to Section 4, the Lebanon loophole, or the reality check on the ground. Now here is where things get super complicated. There's this glaring disconnect between the nice, neat ink on the diplomatic paper and the actual bomb still dropping in reality. According to Pakistani mediators and Iranian officials, the official agreement declares the termination of military operations on all fronts, explicitly including Lebanon. But on the ground, the harsh reality is entirely different. Israel, who is sidelined from these specific U.S.-Iran negotiations, refuses to be bound by the text, and the war continues to grind on just across the border.
And Israel's stance poses a severe threat to the broader peace framework. They remain completely firm that they are not bound by the Islamabad Memorandum, and they are refusing to withdraw troops from southern Lebanon.
In fact, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly rejected explicit requests from Vice President Vance to scale back the IDF's presence. With airstrikes in Beirut ongoing, this loophole threatens to completely unravel the fragile truce between Washington and Tehran.
Finally, Section 5, Pushback and Fragile Futures, Enemies from Within.
Because even if you look past the battlefield, the deal faces massive roadblocks from domestic hardliners who view this ceasefire as a disastrous compromise. On the Iranian side, ultra-hardline factions like the Paydari Front and elements of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps are furious over what they see as a surrender to Washington. They even stage protests against their own chief negotiators. Meanwhile, critics in the US and Israel are incredibly angry that the deal doesn't permanently restrict Iran's ballistic missile program and essentially abandons the goal of total regime change.
You really get a sense of this visceral anger from within elements of the Iranian government when you look at quotes like this. Ayatollah Nabivian, Iran's National Security Commissioner, heavily criticized the framework, specifically targeting U.S. oversight of those reconstruction funds. By declaring that the agreement would turn Iran into a colony of America, he highlighted the incredible tightrope Iranian leadership has to walk at home just to get this deal finalized.
So, the digital ink may be dry on the initial framework, but the hardest work has honestly just begun. As we wrap up this explainer, you really have to ask yourself, can the leaders who signed this deal survive the ticking clock? Can they navigate the highly technical nuclear talks, a literal ongoing war in Lebanon, and the furious protests from their own citizens? The global economy and the stability of West Asia entirely depends on the answer. Thank you so much for joining me to unpack this, and definitely keep a close eye on that 60-day countdown.